Spring is just 2 weeks away and the weather's really starting to warm up, which means that we can start planting all of our warmer crops very soon, which means that right now is a great time to get started with sowing all of those seeds. And I'll also give you a couple of ideas of where you can put all of your full seed trays while you're waiting for your seeds to start. So here are all of the seeds that I am starting right now. The warm season has started to come a bit early this year, which means that I have chosen to take advantage of that and starting some of my seeds a bit earlier. We are most likely still going to have a couple cold nights that we'll have to compete with, but all that means is that if we have the seedlings by then, we'll just bring them inside, keep them out of the frost, and we should be right to properly get going with a lot of our warmer crops. First up in these bigger pots is where I've started my pumpkin, specifically my Jap Pumpkin, which I think is actually JAP. I believe it's an acronym. If you've never grown pumpkins before, this is a great variety to get started with. They're easy to grow, they're hardy, they are not frost tolerant, so you do have to look after them while they're still in their seedlings. If you're starting them as early as I have, or if you're later in the season, you can basically direct sow them and they should do fine. If you can give them enough space and nutrition, they grow a lot of fruit, they grow big. They're the perfect pumpkin varieties to get started with. Although you do have to dedicate a fair chunk of your yard to them because they will vine out a fair bit. Next up, I finally get to get started on some of the summer bean varieties, some of the non-frost and non-cold tolerant bean varieties. This year I'm growing a variety which I've never tried before, but it looks so pretty. I really wanted to try it. It's the Purple King climbing beans. They grow very similar to your garden variety green bean, only they produce this beautiful purple pod. And I'm sure seeing these climb up a trellis and then the purple pods hanging off will look like an excellent addition to the garden. Next up, I'm starting my cucumbers, which will be my first time growing cucumbers in about a decade or so because I've never really had the space for them. And cucumbers are allelopathic, which means that they can suppress the growth of other nearby plants, so you do need to have their own space dedicated to them. Thankfully this year I've got a space over here that's going to be separate from everything. I'm going to grow beautiful cucumbers in. These are the Burpless Hybrid, aka Burpless F1 variety, which are a great flavour. They grow a bit thicker than the ones that you'll find in the supermarket, and they're such a great all-round variety to grow at home. Next up we have one of the veggies that I regret the most not growing last year because it's such a no-brainer to have in the garden. That is celery. If you ever use celery, it's such a no-brainer to grow because when you are cooking with it, you only want 1 or 2 spears at once, but you have to buy a whole celery plant. So growing it in the garden, coming out and snapping off 1 or 2. In terms of producing less waste and saving you money, it's one of the best veggies to have in the garden. They are really, really water hungry, so make sure that you're in a good habit with watering them. But as long as you're watering them, they are really prolific growers, and fair warning, if you let them go to seed, you will find that you will have celery popping up for years on end. I did at my last house. I let one of them go to seed and that corner of the yard was essentially a celery lawn by the end of it. Next up, the summer crop, the summer vegetable. The reason that I think a lot of Australians especially get started gardening is they want to grow these at home. All of my different tomatoes. For the moment, I've only started 3 varieties. I might take a look at 1 or 2 more. I only have enough space for 1.5 rows of tomatoes, so I can't go too crazy with it, but I do really, really like tomatoes, so we'll find out. First off, this is just a cherry tomato, hybrid cherry tomato, really well growing. These are really hardy. Last year I had a couple of these grow all the way through until winter basically started. I only pulled them out because I expected to not really have the time to look after the garden, but in hindsight, I think you can probably nearly overwinter these throughout temperate Australia, especially if you have some sort of sheltered spot like a greenhouse that they could fit in. Next up, the classic. One of the reasons that I first started gardening was I wanted to grow these, the ox heart tomatoes, those beautiful, massive, huge tomatoes that are great for slicing, great for sandwiches and burgers and that sort of thing. The other variety that we're going somewhat similar is the Rogue de Marmalade, which is such an aesthetically pleasing looking tomato. If you think of a classic heirloom tomato, that's exactly what you're picturing with the Rogue de Marmalade. They have a great flavor. Last year I only got a couple of them. This year I have sown a lot more because they're so delicious. Next, I have a confession. I have never actually grown my favorite vegetable. Heads and shoulders above my favorite vegetable to eat, put in salads, stir fries. I very comfortably eat it raw. Capsicums, I've never actually grown them. They should grow really well in this climate. I'm really looking forward to growing it this year. I have grown chilies before, which are obviously a different cultivar of the same species, so I'm pretty confident we'll get something out of it, but oh man, I'm really looking forward to my own fresh capsicum. I wonder if they will be similar to tomatoes and carrots, where the ones that you grow at home are so much more flavorful than the ones that you buy in the supermarket, because man, do I love capsicum. I cannot understate how much I love capsicum. Next on, just got some more broccoli. We'll try and get another crop of these through before it gets too hot in the summer. Obviously you can probably see I have a really nice crop of broccoli and also cabbages. Those will be ready to harvest in a couple of weeks. Once I get the new beds in, I'll try and do a couple rows of more broccoli. I use it for everything. If I had enough, I would definitely use a full head of broccoli with basically every meal. It's so versatile, it's so sweet. This is just your garden variety green sprouting broccoli. Super versatile, super easy to grow, and you can actually pack them in quite tightly in your veggie garden. Next up, with a bit of an impulse buy, some lemongrass, which is a perennial, so hopefully this is the only time that I'm starting it. Looking more and more to try and turn my entire yard into just an edible garden. I'll replace some of the ornamentals with lemongrass. I've started using it in cooking more. It's really lovely. Next up, I have previously already started most of my herbs because I do have the space inside to get them started under some grow lights and in some really sunny windowsill spots. Really, the only one left is sage. I haven't started any of yet. This is my first start of sage for the year. Looking forward to that. Such a pretty plant. It's probably the prettiest herb in my opinion. Maybe thyme when it flowers is really good. If you count rosemary, rosemary is beautiful, especially when it flowers. And next we have my zucchinis, which is one of my favorite veggies of all time. Really prolific. So far, I have started 3 in probably 6 weeks. I'll start a couple more because I'll have some bed space open up. One of my favorite veggies. The variety that I'm growing is called the blackjack, a great garden variety. There's 2 main garden varieties of zucchinis that you can grow. The blackjack is the one that you can plant closest together. Has this beautiful dark green outer shell. I found they grow quite well here. I love them. Great, I chuck them in everything. Next up, something different. If you've been following me on Instagram, you might have noticed a bit of a theme of something that I'm planting a lot more of this year than I have previously. And that are all different kinds of flowers. Now, I have been quite a basic bitch when it comes to the companion flowers that I've been putting in the gardens all previous years. This year, I'm really trying to break out of that and also have a lot higher focus on natives than I have in previous years, especially now that I live a lot closer to agricultural land and like wild land that I want to, 1, make sure no non-natives escape because that's becoming quite a big issue in Australia, and 2, try and create a bit more of an enticing environment for the local pollinators to come into my garden and help pollinate everything for me. So first up is probably the funkiest one that I'm starting and one that I really hope works out because it's meant to be quite a challenging seed to start, and that's native wisteria. If you've never seen native wisteria, it is this beautiful climbing plant. The leaves look kind of like eucalyptus-y, gum tree, think native Australian leaf, but then it has this beautiful purple flower and it's actually a climbing plant. So you put it next to a trellis and it'll climb up it, and it's this beautiful space filler. It flowers for a decent chunk of the season. I really want it. I've been trying to get it for a while and I finally found some seeds. The native wisteria plant is a bit funny. So it is actually a perennial. So once I've got it forever if I don't kill it. But it has evolved to only start its own seeds after a bushfire event. And the way that you need to start them is you put them in hot water overnight and the seeds swell up. You are meant to put in this other chemical that simulates fire smoke that also helps trigger those hormones. I haven't done that. If these don't start, I'll have to buy that and then do that thing. Really hoping these start. I'm really looking forward to growing them. That's native wisteria. And it's probably a good time to mention because...
Hey, it's Ryan who's editing this video. At this point, I went on to talk about exactly how I start seeds, and I went into a lot of detail around soil temps and humidity and how I start them inside and how I harden them off, and then how I choose the different pot sizes for the different plants. And the segment got a bit too long and a bit too off topic for this particular video. I think too many people who just came here to see what seeds I'm starting might click off. But if you do want to see me talk about that, please let me know in the comments and I'll make it its whole own video. Or if you do want to see it right now, I will clip up that segment and I'll upload it to my Patreon for the paid members. Running the channel is surprisingly expensive, so if you want to help put a dent in those costs, please consider checking out the Patreon. Back to talking about more seeds that I'm starting.
Next up, if you are a seasoned gardener, you'll definitely know these. You'll probably already have some started. Nasturtiums and marigolds, 2 very common companion flowers. These are actually dwarf nasturtiums. They're only going to be over in the whole other corner of the yard. You might never actually see them on camera. Marigolds, one of the best all-round companion plants. I'm going to be shoving these in here, there, and everywhere. I might start a second tray of these soon. And they're very pretty. They're such a pretty flower, and They have such an appealing smell to a lot of the predators of the bugs that we don't like. So they'll bring in insects that eat things like aphids. Next up, some more natives. Another one it's been really high on my list of native flowers that I've wanted to grow for a while. They're kind of hard to find. I find it quite annoying that how non-mainstream native Australian flowers are, because we have some really, really cool ones. These are everlasting, specifically golden everlastings, otherwise known as everlasting daisies. They're just such a beautiful flower. Once you have them, they will pop up every year. I believe they're technically a perennial, but you can kind of think of them as an annual that just self-seeds. Like they completely die off and then come back. So pretty, beautiful for cut flowers. They come in just about every color that you can imagine. So pretty, and native insects love them. And next up, there's a fair few other natives that I would love to get, but I'm having trouble finding some of them. So I've just got an Australian native flower mix. Put it into these seed cells, we'll see what we get out of them, and I'll put these around in the different garden beds. While we're talking about flowers, if you want some other ideas for flowers to start, here are some ones that I started a couple weeks ago that you can also check out. Here are some that I already started actually a couple weeks ago, but you can obviously start right now. Snapdragons, cornflowers, alyssum, sweet peas, and of course pansies. Pansies, I actually think, I've done a full bell curve on them I thought they were great. I thought they were basic and I didn't like them, but now I think they're great again. If you look after them through the late season, they will self-seed. And later on in that year, anywhere that you have previously had them, you'll have them popping up again. Like, I will show you some of my planters where they've just gone mad, and places that I had just 1 or 2 little pansies last year. And while we're here, let me show you my little seed table because I'm really proud of it. If you're like me and 6 to 8 weeks out of the year, you want a lot of benchtop space to start your seedlings, to do a lot of potting up, and then the rest of the year you don't really need it, well, check out my little DIY solution. You can buy these locking square brackets from Bunnings for about $12 each. I bought 2 of them, a plank of plywood. I used some scrap wood underneath to help make sure to stabilize it. Bolted it to my garden beds. You can do the same thing to a fence or to a wall. And this time of year when I need it, I have a whole bunch of bench space to do leave my seedlings out during the day, use it as a potting up space. Especially early spring, I always have so many seed trays that I want to start and I want to keep out and rotate them inside the greenhouse, outside to harden them off, or just leave them out, or inside and then outside. And just where am I going to put all these seed trays? Well, I finally built a temporary bench for them so that through these couple of weeks when I really need all the space, I have it here ready to go when I need. And then in a couple months' time when I no longer need as much tray space, all I do is each side just clicks and drop it down, and I've got all my nice space back. And yes, the plywood won't last forever, but I'll paint it soon. If you like this video, make sure to hit thumbs up so that YouTube knows to send you more content like it. If you enjoyed watching this video, YouTube will think that you'll like watching this one as well. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.
Is this